We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And they could articulate the vision because we had connected it in such a way that people could run with the vision. And so you've got to get people to understand it so they can run with the vision. Number 2, you have to focus on what we call organizational momentum. You see, many times pastors feel like if I can preach it from the pulpit, that should be enough. And everybody should just jump on board. But the reality is you need an infrastructure, you need an organization of people that are going to help you run with that vision effectively. So we have to create what we call organizational momentum. Passionate leaders develop other passionate leaders. By the way, let me stop real quick. I said the first thing you need to do is you needed to understand your reasoning for being, which is your mission. And then you had to find a way to uniquely fulfill that mission, which is called your vision. And then you needed to create passion in the people by articulating or communicating that vision. So mission, vision, passion. Get that in your mind. Mission, vision, passion. And then take the first letter of each one and you get MVP. How you turn a congregation into most valuable players is you make sure they understand the mission, they've got the vision, and they have the passion. And you will take a crowd or people in your church and move them from just being spectators in the stands to being MVPs on the court by understanding those principles. So we have to develop other passionate leaders. And there's a degree of that cannot be delegated. I mean, each of my leaders and my staff members, they're responsible for developing leaders within their area. My youth pastor develops his leaders. My children's pastor develops their leaders. But at some stage, the pastor himself has to be responsible for expanding leadership. So I've always taught leadership in the church, and I've always been developing other passionate leaders along the way. So you have to equip, let me back that up real quick. There we go. You have to equip leaders not only to be passionate, but you have to equip them to inspire other volunteers and other donors. When we talk about developing leaders, you know what so many people do? They develop somebody to do a task. Okay, I'm going to develop you to teach Sunday school. I'm going to develop you to be an usher. I'm going to develop you to be a greeter. And they call that leadership development. But leadership development is when you get a group of people that you change their role. Instead of just managing something and just doing a task, you get them to be a motivator, you get them to be a multiplier, and you get them to be a mobilizer. In other words, instead of me being the only person that's recruiting and building teams and motivating people, I've got hundreds of leaders in my church who understand that their job is not just to be an usher, but every time they see somebody new in the church that they feel like could be interested in being an usher, I don't go recruit them all, they go recruit them all. And they bring them to their captain and say, hey, here's a new guy in the church, been here about 3 or 4 weeks, and they think this is going to be their church home, and he'd like to get involved. Could he be an usher? I didn't recruit them. We didn't put a slide up on the screen and say we need more ushers. We didn't do any of that. We had people connecting with people and bringing them in the process. I made them a motivator. I made them a multiplier. I made them a mobilizer. Every year we do an annual banquet called You Make the Difference, and every year it increases because each year we pose this challenge to them. This time next year, who will be sitting next to you that you have reproduced yourself in the ministry? Will there be another one just like you because you took the effort to bring somebody under your wing and mentor them? They might be a 16-year-old, they may be a 26-year-old, they may be a 56-year-old. It doesn't matter to us. But when you come to the banquet next year, we don't want you to come and just sit here and say, well, we did another year's worth of ministry. We want you to look beside you and say, this person wasn't involved in ministry a year ago this time, but they are now because I became a motivator, a multiplier, and a mobilizer. I got other people in the ministry. Instead of the pastor doing all the recruiting, instead of staff members doing all the so the natural question then is, what do we have to do to create that internal momentum? What are the steps to create internal momentum? How does that work? Well, first of all, don't wait for momentum, create it. I have too many people who say, well, eventually it's going to happen. Something's good going to come our way. This is going to take place. Maybe the new factory's supposed to move in town. They're going to open a new university. Maybe they're going to build another prison there in Central Valley. I don't know. And they're going to populate a new group of employed people. I don't know what it is, but so many people get in this wait and see mode, and they're just kind of waiting for momentum to come their way. And when it comes, they plan on getting their board out and riding the wave with it. And what we had to realize in ministry is that you can't wait for momentum. You have to create momentum. You have to stimulate something to happen. And so we focus on how it is that how it's possible to begin to create momentum. So how do you do that? Well, let's walk through a few steps. First of all, you have to refocus on your mission. When we talk about mission and vision, these are terms that are somewhat interchangeable to a lot of people. And so we'll just kind of give you the definition as we understand it or apply it to our studies and to the churches that we work with. Simply defined, mission is this: the reason for being. We exist for these reasons. Our mission statement is why we exist, or we exist for this reason, the reason for being. It's interesting to me that most organizations and entities in America have a clear and compelling mission statement. They know why they exist. The hospital, right near close to us, has a clear mission statement, and that is they exist to provide health care services to people who have physical health needs in their body. They know why they exist. Now, the gas station understand why it exists. It exists primarily to provide fuel to vehicles that need to go down the road. I understand they have a convenience store and some other things attached to it, but by and large, a gas station exists to provide fuel economy for people. Restaurants know why they exist. They exist to provide food service to people who have an appetite. They come in and desire food to place an order, and they exist to make sure that the food is delivered in a manner in which is pleasing to the customer and tastes well, that they'll enjoy the experience. Now, all three of those experiences that I just identified for you, and I could go on and list many others, all of them understand what their reason for being or reason for existence is. And yet in all three of those places, they have some peripheral items. You go over here to the hospital, and you'll find they have a gift shop, they have a cafeteria, they have a vending area. They have other peripheral services that they provide at that hospital, but they understand that they don't exist to be a flower shop. They don't exist to be a cafeteria. They don't exist to be a vending station. They exist first and foremost to be a medical facility. The restaurant may have the games out in the lobby that the kids play with, or the little coin vending machines out there that they drop a quarter in and get a bouncy ball or some gum. And the gas station understands that selling chips and sodas might bring more people in as a convenience center, but they understand why they exist at the core. For me, my struggle is that most churches don't know why they exist. They're very vague on what is our reason for being. And as a result of that, they suffer from the number one health disease in churches across America today. As we look and study them over and over again, the number one health disease in churches today is called mission drift. Mission drift. They have drifted from their reason for being. Now, I do realize that we are a diverse group here today, and we have different denominations represented here, but I believe what I'm going to share with you are 5 words that every mission statement should contain, and these 5 words should be the reason why you exist, regardless of how you present the gospel, whether you're Presbyterian or Pentecostal or Baptist. It doesn't matter in this context, but every church ministry, I believe, should exist and understand it exists for these 5 simple and yet compelling realities. Number 1, we exist to be a soul-winning church. We exist for the purposes of evangelism. You say that's a no-brainer, preacher. You'd think so. But out of 300,000 Christian evangelical churches last year in America, and by the way, let me say for 2 years in a row, for 2010 and 2011, for those 2 years, out of 300,000 churches in America, 90% of them did not report one single conversion disciple after a year's worth of ministry. Now, I'm saying not just somebody come down and prayed the prayer. They probably had those people, but did they have a retained disciple in their ministry at the end of the year as a result of that year's worth of ministry? Do you know how many billions, and that's with a B, do you know how many billions of dollars worth of ministry money was spent in 2010 and 2011 to result in only about 10% of the churches in America actually having retained new converts in discipleship form that are staying connected to the church today? That's because there's mission drift. We get sidelined. We think we've got to run the bake sales, and we've got to run this event, we've got to run this event. And how much of your energy and how much of your budget is actually targeted towards reaching the lost? See, that's really the telltale story, because you can say we're a soul-winning church, but if you're not actually using your energy, your people, your time, and your resources, your money, and your facilities to be a soul-winning agency, then you're probably not going to be fulfilling this particular element. You are suffering somewhat from mission drift. Then we have to talk about discipleship. That's natural. I mean, once you get them saved, you got to get them to be a disciple. You've got to get them to become a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ. Do you have a system in place that intentionally, not accidentally, but intentionally moves people from the point of decision into a point of spiritual progression and maturity in the body of Christ? You say, well, we're offering Sunday school classes and we're offering worship experiences, and that's all in good. But there's a difference between that and offering an intentional roadmap for new people finding a way of spiritual progression into knowing what it means to follow after the Lord. Thirdly, you ought to offer yourself as a place of corporate worship. Now, that's probably one of the pieces that we do relatively well, but I think we don't fully appreciate the value of what we're talking about. It's not just about coming together and singing some songs and hearing a sermon, but it's about coming together and realizing that we are a part of the body of Christ, and that you may be the hand and I may be the foot, and you may be the eye and I may be the ear, but we're all connected, and therefore we need each other. So when we come together in worship, he said to us that when we come together, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, Hebrews 10:24 and 25, but when you come together, provoke one another. We do that part pretty good, but we didn't read the rest of the verse. But to provoke one another to love and to good works. So we ought to be checking on one another, not just shaking hands. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, it's hot today. Yeah, I agree. How about those Thunders, man? They won that game. Okay, let's sit down and have church, and we have nothing else to say to each other. How about actually checking on one another? Don't give me the church face and say, yeah, all is well. No, say, I really want to know. How are you doing? Is all well with your soul? Can I pray with you about something today? The corporate body coming together, ministering to one another, exhorting one another, building one another up. And then that community of caring or fellowship. Every church needs to have that community of relationships. By the way, if you don't know it, relationship is the glue that keeps people in the church. If you don't have relationship building experiences, people will come and go, leave as fast as they come. They'll come to the door, they'll get tired of just looking at other people sing and clap and shout and preach, and they'll exit in a very short period of time. The average person needs to know at least 6 people by name within 6 months, or they will leave your church. And I'm going to flip that around. At least 6 people need to know them by name within 6 months, or they will leave the church. So there's a reciprocating reality. I need to know 6 people that I can call by name. I can sit with them in church. I can go have coffee with them on a midweek night. I can have Sunday lunch with them. They can call me. We're connected to them. If there's not that nucleus of at least 6 people, then those people are at risk of leaving your ministry very easily. And by the way, let me just add one other note here. What we've discovered is that people arrive 6 months earlier than their financial support does. In other words, they'll you out sometimes for as long as 6 months before they actually start investing in that local church. Now, if they're a transfer and they've been taught tithing all their life, that may be the exception to the rule. But a lot of people are coming in, checking you out. They're deciding if they're wanting to invest. They might tip in the offering. They might put a 10 or a 5 or something here and there. But to actually be a committed support of that ministry, it usually takes about 6 months. Now, let me give you the other side of that story. Usually people's money leave 6 months before they leave. They start decreasing their giving earlier than what they actually walk out the door. Now, I know different structures allow for different things. In some churches, the pastor's not supposed to know who's giving or what they're giving, and that's all up to you. Somebody needs to know what's going on with the finances. Somebody needs to say, hey, some people are dropping in their giving. I don't know if they lost their job. I don't know if they've had a financial disruption. I don't know if they've had a medical disaster. I don't know what's going on, but somebody should be checking on these people because there's a trend. An alert needs to go off. So I get alerts from my staff, and my staff gets alerts to say, something's going on here. We're seeing a disruption in giving patterns. We need to find out if they're okay, find out what's going on. We don't walk up and say, how come you stopped tithing? We walk up to them and say, what's going on? Did you lose your job? Did your wife lose your job? Did you have a medical disruption? Or you have some big debt that you didn't anticipate? Were you involved in a car accident? We're searching to find out answers. And usually, if you start probing in the right way, it's usually enough to let them become re-engaged again so that you don't lose them. But if you just let it run its course and all of a sudden they're not there, then you're making a tragic mistake, in my opinion. Christian service. I think it is completely irresponsible for the body of Christ to suggest to believers that they can come to church and not be responsible for a place of ministry or service. Now, that may be putting a smile on your face and shaking hands at the front door. It might be in the prayer closet before or after services or during services where you're in a back room praying that souls are going to be saved and the ministry is going to go forth effectively. It might be people who call during the middle of the week and check on other people. It might be the person who vacuums during the middle of the week and straightens the chairs or cleans up the pew and picks up the papers. It doesn't matter to me. But I believe every Christian has a purpose in the body of Christ, and I believe they ought to be involved in that process. The fact is that if they don't have a connection of service, they're more likely to, again, become disengaged from the church and disengaged from the body of Christ as well. So I strongly believe that we've got to teach people these concepts very significantly. We've got to know what our mission is, and we've got to stay to our mission.